Have you ever wondered why the quietest person in the room always seems to hold the most power? Not the one shouting, not the one showing off, but the one who's just there, still, calm, present. What are they hiding behind that silence? Or maybe they're not hiding at all. Maybe they're just not trying to prove anything, because they don't have to. Most people confuse loudness with strength, but real strength doesn't need to be seen. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't need validation. It just is. And silence is its armor. The loud ones often act from insecurity. They fill every space with noise so no one notices the fear behind their eyes. But the quiet ones, they observe, they absorb. They're not avoiding the world, they're mastering it, one breath at a time. While others rush to speak, the quiet person waits. While others react, they pause, not because they're slow, but because they've already calculated the outcome before anyone else has even started thinking. In a world addicted to speed, noise, and attention, silence is rebellion. And those who master it, they become untouchable. The quietest person in the room isn't silent because they're weak. They're silent because they're beyond the noise. They're grounded in something the rest haven't even discovered yet. The world teaches you to speak up, be loud, stand out. But silence is what makes you unpredictable. Silence makes people wonder. It creates mystery, and mystery commands attention far louder than noise ever could. Think about it. In movies, the most dangerous character is never the one yelling. It's the one sitting quietly in the corner, calm, calculated, controlled. The one everyone watches but no one dares to confront. Why? Because their silence says, I don't need to prove anything to you. I already know who I am. In real life, it works the same. Quiet people carry an aura, an energy that doesn't need explaining. You feel it when they walk into a room. It doesn't matter what they wear or how they look. It's not appearance, it's presence. And presence comes from inner strength, from the discipline to stay still when everyone else is moving, from the patience to let chaos collapse on its own, from the control to not react. Because reacting means letting others dictate your emotional state. The strongest minds aren't the ones that dominate conversations. They're the ones that can sit in silence, fully alert, fully in control. They speak when their words will hit like a hammer, not when their ego needs a fix. That's the paradox. The quieter you become, the louder your power feels to others. And the more you master your silence, the more you start to realize you never needed to raise your voice to be heard. There's a kind of strength that doesn't ask for attention. It doesn't walk in with noise. It doesn't need permission. That strength is built in silence, refined in reflection, sharpened in solitude. The quietest people aren't just silent, they're strategic. Every word they choose is deliberate. Every pause is a choice. They listen more than they speak because they know. True knowledge doesn't shout, it whispers. In the workplace, in friendships, in conflict, those who master silence gain leverage. Because when you're not constantly reacting, you create space. Space to think, space to decide, space to win. Most people fear silence. It makes them uncomfortable. It exposes their inner noise. But for the strong, silence is peace. It's power. It's control over impulse and emotion. And in a world that thrives on distraction, that's rare. You can fake loudness. You can pretend confidence. But you can't fake silence. Silence is earned through pain, through discipline, through knowing who you are and not needing to explain it to anyone. And once you own that silence, people listen when you speak, not because you raise your voice, but because they've learned your voice is only used when it matters. Subscribe if you're done yelling to be heard and ready to master the silence that truly speaks. Silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the presence of focus. In a distracted world, attention is currency, and those who control their attention quietly rule the game. The loudest voices are often the most insecure. They fill silence with words because they fear being ignored. But the strongest person doesn't chase attention. They attract it by doing the opposite. They become a mirror to others. When they speak, it's with weight. And when they don't, their silence is louder than words. Great leaders, thinkers, and warriors throughout history understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote in silence. Seneca practiced stillness. The Stoics didn't shout, they endured. Their strength wasn't in their volume, it was in their control. You don't have to dominate the room with presence. Dominate it with calm, with clarity, with certainty. When chaos rises, the silent one stays steady. That's why people trust them. That's why people follow them. Because silence shows restraint, and restraint is discipline, and discipline is power, not the kind of power that needs recognition, but the kind that builds legacy, the kind that doesn't fade when the noise fades. Most people speak to be understood, but the quiet ones, they listen to understand. This is their superpower. They don't dominate the room, they observe it. When others argue to prove something, they remain composed, scanning every word, every micro-expression, every shift in energy. While noise chases attention, silence gathers information, and information is power. They're not being quiet because they're shy. They're silent because they're processing, building a map. They know that speaking too soon often means speaking without precision, and nothing is more dangerous than careless words. In conflict, the quiet person doesn't flinch. They pause. That pause isn't fear, it's calculation. They're measuring the weight of your words, the logic behind your emotion, and the true motive behind your tone. By the time you react, they already saw the ending. Silence gives them an edge that noise never could. While others overshare, overtalk, and overcompensate, the quiet ones gain clarity, and from clarity comes precision. When they do speak, it lands like a hammer, not because they shout, but because they rarely speak, and that rarity gives them gravity. Their silence becomes legend. People remember it, question it, respect it, and sometimes fear it. You see, when the quiet person finally speaks, the room listens, not because they have volume, but because they've earned weight. And in a world addicted to noise, that weight is a superpower. They don't need to win arguments. They win minds. They don't need to prove strength. They embody it. They don't fight for control. They already have it. They don't break the silence to be heard. They let the silence do the speaking. Sometimes silence isn't about fear or weakness. It's about control. The most powerful people in the world are often the quietest. Why? Because their silence isn't empty. It's loaded with thought, with awareness, with presence. The quiet person in the room doesn't try to dominate. They don't interrupt. They don't chase attention. But somehow they still become the center of gravity, because silence forces others to fill in the blanks. It creates mystery. It builds tension. It draws people in. They don't speak to react. They speak to impact. And that changes everything. You can feel when a quiet person is about to talk. The air shifts. People lean in. Even those who usually interrupt go silent. That's presence. That's power. But here's the truth no one tells you. Silence also reveals you to yourself. In a world that never shuts up, choosing silence is like choosing to face your thoughts. No distractions, no noise, just you and the voice inside. That's where you learn if you're in control or just pretending. Most people are terrified of this space. They hide behind words, notifications, noise, but the quiet ones, they live in that space. They build their strength from it. They don't need to say they're confident. You feel it. They don't announce their purpose. You sense it. They don't argue to win. They choose to walk away, and somehow they still win. Because power doesn't beg, it waits. So if you've ever felt like your silence is a weakness, maybe it's time to see it as a weapon, not for attack, but for mastery, for clarity, for unshakable presence. And now I'll leave you with one question. If your silence could speak, what would it reveal about who you really are? If that question shook something in you, then you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe now, and let's rebuild your strength from the inside out. Because silence, real silence, doesn't ask for validation. It doesn't scream for approval. It doesn't rush to fill the space with opinions or noise. It watches, it studies, it absorbs, and then, only then, it acts with precision. Think about the people you truly respect. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, the ones who seem to carry gravity with them, the ones who don't need to raise their voice to change the temperature in a room. That's not coincidence, that's learned presence. And here's the paradox. The less you explain yourself, the more powerful you become. You don't need to tell people who you are. You just need to be so solid they can't ignore it. This is the path of silent strength, and it's not for everyone. But if you've made it to this point, maybe it's for you. So ask yourself, quietly and honestly, what would happen if you stopped chasing noise and started owning your silence? If your answer even scares you a little, stay close. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. Subscribe now, and let's build the kind of power that doesn't need to shout to be heard.